Hello and welcome to episode 27 of Eve Just Chatting. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about the topic passion versus money in your job choice. And this came basically out of several discussions I had lately on management boards and during travel with other business owners, etc. And one part of the discussion was, why is it that we have so many discussions lately around the amount of hour, the amount of time everybody has to work or wants to work, or basically how people participate in the work-life system? And whilst it's totally clear that people have the idea that they ideally don't want to waste too much of their time at the workplace, the question is the workplace then the wrong place to be in the first place? So when I look back at the beginning of my career, and I said this already in a short TikTok video a while ago, where I said when I basically finished school, two of the options I was looking into is to whether I either run into a career in the IT space or whether I would actually become a pilot. Those of you who follow me know that by now I actually fulfill both of them. But back in the days, I was basically in the evaluation scenario with Lufthansa. Back in those days, it was actually still the scenario that Lufthansa would cover all your educations you needed to have as a pilot, and a pilot at Lufthansa was actually quite a decent job. Nowadays, I'm not sure if I would want to be an airline traffic pilot anymore. A lot of my friends actually are charter pilots, so they fly for private airline companies. They fly as individual pilots for people who need them from time to time. So similar to, for example, what I do. So there are certain conditions where I just don't want to fly alone, or where just my rating is not high enough. So then I'm going to actually hire one of them. So I have pretty good insights into that. Back in those days, I was basically not chosen by Lufthansa in the first round, which was not a big deal basically for me, because my other passion, getting a job in IT, was actually felt like being higher on my wish list anyway. It was more that more or less my parents back then had a bit of an idea that maybe having a real job would make more sense, and being self-employed, I mean, both of them were self-employed by themselves before and had their own little architecture firm in the building industry, and they primarily did industrial buildings. And so they looked at me and said, it's like, why don't you pursue your career in the pilot scenario? So that was why I, second. That is primarily why I choose the career path then, and actually went to the trial exam. And it was also quite an interesting idea to just actually try out the test scenario and figure out if that could actually be my scenario. As I said in the other video, I was not chosen. So I ended up actually pursuing my career in the IT industry. And whilst I was doing that career setting in the IT industry, again, I first looked into getting a normal senior education or a degree in that space, but very early on figured out it's not necessarily giving me what I was looking for. So I did my civil service back in the days, and then from the civil service out, I started what now has become computer vision over all these years. And so from that perspective, I went the, let's say, easier path, or not the easier, but the pathway which actually went to the career I wanted to have. And especially due to the fact that especially when you start your career in being self-employed or something like that, it's not always easy. It's you're not necessarily immediately getting to the point where you can pursue the career and the way you want to have it to be. And from time to time, I also was in the position that I had to take on jobs in that career which were not necessarily my passion, but helped me to basically survive in that time scenario and basically survive in that job scenario. And I did that at any point in time because I knew that this was my passion. And because it was my passion, it never felt very hard to actually work extra hours or to do something extra, because it actually helped me pursue my career. Many other people which I met over the years in that career or in that industry also did similar things. So that is potentially why so many people also in more senior roles in IT get confused when people say it's like, hey, I want to have all the education during the work time. I don't want to actually go the extra mile or anything like that. And especially in IT, you constantly need to be learning, or you will be stuck with a certain level and you can't actually move on, which might be fine for some people. But what I have learned, if you really want to achieve something more or something better, then you constantly need to educate yourself and be up to speed at a higher pace. And that requires that you take your passion and actually utilize that for yourself. And when we look at the fact last couple of years, the interesting part is that people are more and more complaining that they must go to work, that on Mondays they are already pursuing the Friday. In a different interview, I don't remember who said that lately, but said basically when you look at current TV, radio stations and stuff like that, they start celebrating the weekend already on Thursday. It's like it's one more day, then it's weekend. And this clearly made me think, it's like, are people really pursuing what their real passion is? Or are they just doing the job for the money so that they have the money to spend the time for what they are really passionate about? So, for example, I'm really passionate about flying airplanes. And so I try to actually do that as much as I can and try to combine that with my job wherever possible as well. But I think this is something you really need to think about when you're choosing your career path, is not necessarily just going by the fact on in which industry or where can you make the most money. When I see candidates also applying for jobs in our scenario, I see very often people come and have a very high ideas on where they want to be, and they have a very high demand is that they want to achieve certain scenarios. But when you start talking to them and start discussing about how do you envision that you are going to get there, and then you hear very often that people are expecting that someone is bringing all of that to you. And I think this is not how this works in the end. The most successful people I have been working with in the last over 20 years in my professional career is those people thank you, greetings back, those people who actually are in it from a passionate perspective. You can take very the top high grade people, and we don't need to discuss whether you're actually like what they are doing from a business perspective or something else. But a very good scenario is, for example, is Elon Musk, because one of the things which he did is when he acquired Twitter, which now is X, and is your name Yves or Yves Sender? No, my name is just Yves. Yves Sandford. Sandford is my last name. When you look at the career path of Elon Musk, or exactly what I just described, the scenario just after he bought Twitter, he basically got back on a plane, flew back to SpaceX to work on an engine problem. Whereas others might have said, it's like, no, you need to celebrate, you need to do all these things. So, I mean, he is celebrating things as well. But when you look at it, he's so passionate about all the things he does and all the companies he's working with, that that is his top priority. And he does never really complain about any of these things. Or if you take other leaders, it doesn't need to be that big of a scenario like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. But many of these leaders who have created these companies have done that out of a passion scenario. When now people are saying it's like, yeah, they have so much money, they don't need to worry about it anymore. When you go through their life, and when you look at the different stages with the companies, there were times where they basically had nothing anymore, where they didn't even know how to purchase the food for the next week or something like that. And it's very, very easy always in the aftermath to say that. But the very, very common scenario you see on many successful people is because they were passionate. And when you look at people like that, and when you look at the current time, there are so many opportunities nowadays on what you can do in your job. When I was young, there was no real option to become a professional gamer, for example. You couldn't actually make a living out of the fact to play computer games. Nowadays, you can actually make good money with it. There was just a story about someone who lost an account with 100,000, which was worth hundred thousands of US dollars, a professional esports gamer. And when you look at that, you can easily make a living out of that. When we look at the complete content creator industry, you can make a living out of telling other people how to live as a digital nomad. You can make a living out of the fact that you actually explain people specific buildings or trains or other things. You just need to be passionate about it, and you should not give up very early. And then you can actually make, in these modern days, you can basically make a living out of whatever job you are thinking about. But the important part for that is you need to take the step. You potentially also need to go to many downs before you actually get there. But the good part is also nowadays is we are living in a time and an industry scenario, and not only in IT, in many other industries as well, where you can basically build up your own style of living and your own style of work the way you want to have it. And if that actually demands that you're only going to work 20 hours a week, that's fine. But also don't underestimate how much time people in this content creator world, for example, are investing into it. I had the wonderful advantage to meet several high rollers in that specific market, and many of them will tell you is how many hours per week they are working. But at the same point in time, they will tell you it's like, but I can finally do what I love as my job. And I think this is what everybody should go back to. So if you feel basically burned out in your daily job, if you feel that every week is just actually you hate the week already on Sunday or Monday, which is going to start, then potentially you should look into what exactly would be your passion. What do you want to make money with? And there are certainly limitations. So for example, I'm definitely not the sports guy. So trying to pursue a career as a professional football player would not necessarily make any sense. However, there are many, many other choices. So, for example, I could actually do background stories potentially and create content in that specific case. I could figure out other roles and possibilities to be near to that job role and make a living out of that. So, even though you might be physically limited that you cannot necessarily achieve the job you're looking for, there are many other options out there available. And as I said, nothing stops you from, no one says you need to completely drop your existing job and give that one completely up and just start with a new career as you want to do that. You could actually start that as a side business, especially when your scenario is about doing something with content, or there are enough people who actually create products. If it's about that you have a great product idea, for example, there have never been easier times where you can actually just build a product idea, then find someone in a different country to produce that good for you, and then you can start selling it. The whole drop shipment scenario is something where I know enough people who made very good money out of that. So there are so many different options on what you could do to finally pursue your career, that it's just a matter in the end is you need to just get started. And I think that's the most important part. And when you speak, for example, to people like Gary Vee, is a perfect scenario, who says it's like, hey, even if you are in your 40s, you can still actually build the career you want to have, and you still can actually do that. And clearly, there are dependencies on in which country you are living and which opportunities you have based on that specific country. So when we look at it, for example, in Germany, is the safety net your worst case falling back into is not actually that bad. I mean, yes, you're not actually going to live a high roller life anymore, but you can actually get away very good. When you look at other countries, for example, in the US, it's a totally different beast. You don't want to completely fall off the scenario. But let's say you have a 40 hours work job. And if you pursue your passion, let's say 20, 30 hours a week, and again, it's your passion, it's something you potentially do anyway already, or you like doing, then you can actually start building up that side business, because it's going to take time, especially when you're talking about doing something in the content space. It's going to take quite a while. On the other side, you could also become so passionate about your topic that you are going to create a book. In modern times, also, again, it has never been easier to actually start getting into writing, because you can use additional AI tools to help you fine print or fine work your words. I'm not saying it's like don't go into an AI engine and let the AI engine write your complete book, because there are all kinds of IP scenarios which haven't been clarified so far. And on top of that, it's not your book. But if you're, for example, going to go ahead and write your own book about a specific topic, and you did that after you have created a certain set of content around yourself, there is a high chance that people are going to buy your book or read your book. That again might open other doors, so that you could actually become a speaker or a moderator or something else. So there are so many options which would have been never open in the past before, that it's actually the wrong scenario that you are going to just stay in the situation you're in. So, as said, it's like the times have never been easier to do that. And once you're basically in your passionate job, the question for me is, why do you stick then with your other job? Maybe your other job is giving you a higher salary, but the question is, in the end, are you going to be happy if you're starting every week on a Monday, just hoping for the weekend so that you can work on your passion? Then I would say that's not the way to go. So when it comes down to a scenario on how to change your life, or how to become or how to get the job you finally want to have, then it's not going to go, or it's not going to work without investing time. So as we are going, do something here on TikTok, because there was an issue with the session. So as we are moving through this, and as you're actually looking into this, it's never going to be successful if you don't invest the time. So if it's something you're passionate about, then you can start, and actually you need to define how many hours per week, for example, am I willing to invest into this to get to that dream scenario that you can actually earn a living out of your passion. And then you stick to it, and then you stay with it for a longer period to finally achieve what you are looking for. And as I said, it's like, if you want to achieve this, you need to be passionate and steady with it. For example, when you speak to content creators, they will tell you it will take you hundreds of videos, text posts, and everything else before you will see the slightest track in it. And that's going to be an interesting story. There are people There are people currently asking about VMware by Broadcom licenses. I will try to take them offline later on, but not in this session because it currently doesn't fit into it. A very good introduction in here is customers heavily asking for good services. If you're good in service, that's it. That's a perfect scenario. Beside being able to do things at the moment, there has never been a better time to be in any kind of customer service. Because whether it is retail industry, whether it is hotel, so anything around guest relations, etc., there has never been a better time to be in guest services and in customer services in general, because so many companies lack of that. So, for example, I had a discussion a few days ago about the German automotive industry. And in that discussion, one of the points which I raised is I have stepped away from most of the German brands from a car perspective many years ago, not because I don't like the brands. I would still say that from a manufacturing perspective, most of the German brands are superior across things like Tesla or others. But the customer service is just a horrible scenario. And then when you look at that, this is something which people are willing to pay for. And this is the same when you are looking into customer services in general. People are willing to pay very good amounts of money for very good service by now. So whether it is clothing industry, for example, or other things of the retail industry, I know enough people who actually utilize personal shoppers for them, who are pre-creating the shopping experience for them, or who are working with the brands to actually get the scenario, because these people don't want to spend the time in a shop to be badly treated. And this is more or less exactly the same what you see in many, many other industries. People are willing to pay for others providing services to save them time. Could be something like ghostwriting. So if you don't have ideas on writing, but you actually like the idea of writing, you could do that. There are people who just make a living out of writing product reviews. So there are so many different options that is going to help you. Here is a message on TikTok. Advice for a startup: don't do products, do individual products with projects with good money. Yes and no. Yes, if you are starting with one or two people, then most likely you're very much better off in actually doing projects for individual customers. This is what we started with ComDivision as well. But when it grows, you need to actually change from the individual projects into products. A product could actually be a packaged service, for example. Like in our case, if I go back to what we do in ComDivision, it is, for example, that we package a design scenario for a specific type of deployment. So we have a standard package which we can actually sell, and then we provide the services and everything else around it. So there are multiple ways on how to address that, but you need to have a plan to move your startup out of the individual projects into the product scenario. Because the problem is individual projects do not scale at one point in time. You will see, and this is, for example, the biggest challenge a lot of companies in the services industry have. Yeah, so same advice. After 1 or 2 years, with the necessary customer experience, move into the more into the product space. That's exactly the pathway. So the typical sizings are, if you start off, you're typically self-employed. It's very good to very early on try to figure out which additional resources you need so that you can focus on your passion. Because again, if you're starting self-employed or with a very small company, you will very early figure out that there is a hell lot of things you have to do around that from a back office perspective, which is not necessarily the fun part. Dealing with taxes, dealing with legal things, dealing with all kinds of other things. finding other people who are really passionate about that and who can take over these things is very important. And then the next stage is actually building products out of your services and actually package them. What you also need to be aware of, if you're building your own company out of it, and if you're building your own company out of these ideas, is that in the end, none of them are going to ever do it the same way as you do it. Gary Vee typically says, it's like, it's not their company. They are employees. And that is another scenario you need to be well aware of as your business or your idea or your system or something else grows. You will have other people involved, and these other people are not necessarily going to make it the way you have been doing it in the past, and they might have a different passion around that and a different scenario. I spoke to a content creator. She was actually building a specific content block for years, and now she finally has a video producer and a few other people around that. And the biggest challenge for her was that she had basically was saying is, initially I thought I was much quicker. And then once I started to have other people do the job of doing the post-production, subscription handling and all these things, it took them nearly the same amount as before. So it takes quite a while to actually get to the point that this is done differently, because as you are doing jobs passionate, you don't necessarily always are that honest to yourself of how much time you're spending on specific tasks. And so you say it's like, yeah, doing a transcript on the video is just 5 minutes for that video. In the end, it's much more time when you're honest. Startup accelerators or public funding helps a lot in Germany. Yes and no. You need to be very, very, very careful with these types of scenarios and approaches. While they are very helpful in the first place, it's also something in many cases, you either are giving up shares or you need to actually pay back that money at one point in time. And this is something where I have seen many people struggle over time as well. The other scenario is, yes, from a network perspective, there is a lot of people out there who are great mentors and who are willing to help. And many of them are not necessarily in it for the money. Yes, some of them want to have some shares or something else, but this is also to have a stick in the game. It might make sense, because if you are giving advice to someone where you have nothing to lose from that perspective, it's not necessarily a good idea. But if you want to find a good mentor or something like that, in many cases, you just have to ask. It's that simple. Many of the people which I had over my career path over all these years, which gave me advice or anything else, were people not necessarily always complete mentors, but those were people which I just asked. I picked up the phone, I made an appointment, and I asked. And that grew my network as well. Nowadays, I have a fantastic network, especially when it comes to the IT industry. I know many C-levels from some of the largest IT companies over the years. I met them personally, and there is a much more personal relationship. So you can pick up the phone and actually talk to them. And in many cases, it's not about that you talk to them to actually get something, which is the biggest mistake which I see very many people do with their network. Is you don't ping the CEO of a very large company just to ask for money, or, hey, can't you give me this and that contract? Or, hey, we have a marketing task, and you talk to the CEO. It's like, hey, couldn't my marketing agency do something for you? It's not that simple. Corporate world is far more complex from that perspective. But if you ask them for introductions, if you ask them to extend your network, if you ask them for any other advice, you very often will get that. And that is an important fact, is learning what you have your network for and how to utilize the network. I was, for example, in the last couple of weeks, challenged with a few scenarios where I had to do some things, especially for our US corporations, where I needed advice from more local people, and I needed help to actually get a few problems solved. within the US. And that was very much straightforward because I more or less, again, picked up the phone, used my networks, and talked to people about the challenges we currently face. And those were not money related or anything like that. Those were really more structural and how to work through certain legal scenarios. And all of a sudden, I had several people give me different advices, set me up with a different network, and all of a sudden, you could actually do that. Here is a comment. I don't ping the CEO of my own company without a very solid reason. Yes and no, but yes, that's true. But when it comes to your network, then you should always think about that you should never be ashamed to ask anyone for help. So, and to reach out to them if you want to have advice. Sometimes you cannot get the advice from people who are on a different level. And it's interesting that my experience over all these years, especially those C-levels, who have come through all the levels of the company, who were initially starting the company or helping with starting the company and stuff like that. All of them are very helpful if you need them and if you want to talk to them. And so this is actually one of the things which I try to do in many geos when I get into a country or when I get into an area. I typically take my LinkedIn or other network services and look up interesting people I want to meet in that area. And then I try either try to reach them direct or try to reach them through other people from that perspective. Good. But coming back to job choice, money versus passion, because that was the topic of today's session. So the most important part is when we try to sum it up is, if you are already on a Monday or Tuesday thinking about when is the next weekend again, then you're most likely in the wrong job. And even if it pays you good money, I mean, maybe take that good money to work on your passion and figure out how the passion you have about your job is, or not about your job, how the passion you are living for could actually become a job. So whatever you do and whatever you like in your spare time, which gives you the power again to do your work job on a Monday morning again, is something you should try to figure out is like, how could I build a real job out of that? And as you are looking into that, maybe start playing around with different ways on how you can actually approach that. The only important notice, which I give everybody always, is if this becomes a side business or anything else, especially when it potentially collides with your daily job, speak to your current employer about it. Otherwise, you can get into more or less serious trouble. And they might actually put all kinds of roadblocks in your way once you actually want to start leaving the company or do something else. So the more open you discuss it, the better. And what I have seen is people over the years, people who actually asked me for help on how to get into a different role or something else. Once they started to talk in their own company about their real passion and what they wanted to do, some of them even found within their own company people who were supporting them and actually doing what they loved for their passion. And actually, they could actually move to their job role and do that as their primary job. So that's perfectly it. Without passion, no success with your own business. Yes, very important point. I made several videos lately about that. Is if you're not passionate about what you're doing, especially as a self-employed, you can certainly make good money. I once said there is a limit somewhere. I would say somewhere between 250 to 500K is going to be the magical limit. You will not get above that limit, no matter what you do, if you're not passionate about your job. That's at least my experience. There might be exceptions from that, but even getting to that limit is very difficult. And so if you want to build something for yourself, you should never do that for the money, because that's never going to work well. It's the same when I talk to people who say, it's like, I want to do this business idea because I want to make the money. Clearly, there are serial entrepreneurs, etc., but the majority of the cases, they are solving human beings' problems, and they are not actually doing that in the first place to quickly make cash. Certainly, there are some who are doing that, but that's not the primary scenario. You need to believe in it. You need to be passionate about it. And that's, by the way, also good advice if you're seeking for funding, because when I see funding rounds and people tell me, hey, and one of the questions I always like to ask is like, what's your plan B and C? And if I then see that people give me a very long explanation for their plan B, C, D, E, whatsoever, and especially when I then also get the feeling that they are very passionate about that, I would not advise anyone to invest into them, because people need to be willing to give up everything, and then they are going to fight for their idea, and that's the highest chance that this startup will be very, very successful. Another comment we just got: I realized management isn't for me, and so I got back into coding and consulting. That's another good example is, as you are pursuing your passion, you might figure out that your passion is not actually what your passion looked like. It felt like, and this is typically where people confuse different roles and positions and lifestyle around that role and position, and then figured out that this is not working for them. So as we go around this, as we are working through this, be sure to always have a very clear sight that whether your passion is really your passion, and otherwise adjust it. Because in the end, if you think about it, we are going to school or primary education, including whatever degree you are pursuing, until typically at least around 2020, somewhere between 20 and 25. Considering retirement somewhere between 65 and 70, because that's a reality, you have more or less 40 years to make up enough money for your retirement. Again, a good point if you actually make your passion your job. I know enough business leaders who are far above 70 and are still not necessarily actively working, but doing advisory works, board roles, and other things. Not board roles primarily for the money, but board roles because they want to give other people something back and they just don't want to sit at home all the time. So that could also be a very good scenario behind it. But yeah, so summing it up, if you are constantly complaining about your daily job role, and if you're thinking about when is it going to be Friday evening again so that you can stop your job, then you are most likely in the wrong job. Figure out what your passion is, figure out how to do it. When you are talking about your passion, and especially if you want to make up your own company, and if you want to build up your own company, never do it for the money, because if you're trying to do that, trust me, I have not seen many people be very successful with that. Majority of people miserably fail with it. The other thing, and the other excuse which a lot of people always tend to do, is only successful company owners and stuff like that are people who come from a family with money and stuff like that. When I look through my network, is yes, potentially some come from families with money or something else or with background. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's easier, because in many cases, that doesn't mean you immediately get money or anything else. So it's not necessarily easier. Those who basically get all funding initially from their family or something else, and who do not need to give something up for that, typically fail within the first 7 to 10 years maximum. Most of them even within the first 3 years, if not mommy and daddy are constantly pushing money in, but then it's not a successful business. So that's more or less it for this episode of Yves Just Chatting, episode 27. We talked about the topic job choice, money or passion. We are going to focus the next few weeks a bit more on another topic which I'm passionate about, just because I released a chapter together with a good friend of mine. Tracy and Palmer wrote a book, and I was able to participate with one chapter. The title of the chapter is different, but I'm going to run a few sessions in the next couple of weeks about the topic Decide or Go Home. And this is really about decision-making processes and things like that, because that is something, it basically more or less fits into the money versus passion scenario. Because when you're passionate about something, you can take the decision, and then you can also take the decision to give up something else. And that's more or less how it falls together. So moving forward, really think about, especially if you are in Germany or somewhere where there is a bank holiday today, if you're feeling already sad about going back to your job tomorrow morning, then better think twice and better revisit if you are in the correct job, and find something you're more passionate about it. And as said, one of the next topics, I will do a few short intro videos on the different platforms about it, is going to be around the topic decide or go home for the next few weeks. And if you want to have any discussions around VMware by Broadcom, utilize one of the other videos. We have regular webinars and stuff like that. I currently did not cover that into today's session. I will try to look it up in the comments later on and try to get back to the 1 or 2 people who actually wrote something about the topic and get you an answer on those. That being said, have a wonderful remaining bank holiday if you have one. A good start into the day if you are in the US. And hope to see you again soon on this channel. And also make sure to subscribe to any of the social media channels or to the podcast so that you're always up to date. Thank you and goodbye.